to save our document and make sure that you save kind of often as you go, we're gonna start off by trying to get the paper background here to fill our whole poster background. So you'll notice that I am on the last layer that I worked on, which was getting these vegetables in here and getting only the vegetables we wanted. As you can see on the layer and a panel over here on the right hand side, we have access to all the layers that are in the document currently. So I've got my paper, I've got the background, and then I've got my vegetables. Now, if you're working with a lot of different layers, this can get very confusing because they just keep saying layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. So I'm going to show you how you can rename these layers. So when you've got the layer selected, if you double click on the name itself, not in the layer, so if you double click in the layer, it brings up a menu, but on the name, you can rename this. So I'm going to call this paper background, and I'm just going to call this vegetables. So now, at least when I'm going through, I know what I'm looking for, what I'm not wanting to have selected. And by default, Photoshop isn't going to change which layer you're on just because of where you've clicked. You're always going to be on the layer that you've selected. So that way you don't accidentally erase something on the layer other than what you're working on, or move something that you don't want to be moving. That way it's just going to stay on the layer that you have selected. So in this case, I want to turn the paper and I want to then have it fill the whole thing. And remember, I'm not going to scale up something that is too small for my paper. So before I get going, I want to hide my vegetables because I don't want to work with them right now and I don't want them to get in the way. So you notice these little eyeballs. That's what that's supposed to be, is an eye that's by each of the layers. That allows you to show and hide. So I've hidden my vegetables. They're still there, but I don't see them right now. So now I want to turn this 90 degrees so that it is the same orientation as my poster. So I have, this will not be on by default. Up at the very top here, when you're in the selection tool, the move tool, this guy says show transform controls. Now that's going to show me the same controls I would get if I went to edit, transform. But rather than going edit, transform, and scale, I find like that's a couple extra steps. I don't want to do it. I oftentimes will click and unclick show transform controls. That also shows me, okay, this is how big my piece of paper really is. It doesn't end at the edges of my composition. And if I have these transform controls shown, and I can tell that because I've got this blue square around it and these little white boxes, then when I move my cursor, sometimes I have the move, but if I'm up near those corners, I get my scale and I get rotation. So I want to turn this 90 degrees. And it's hard to get exactly 90. So if I click on the shift key, it will snap to 90. It kind of does increments here, as you can see, of 15 degrees. And I want it to be 90 degrees. So that's me happy. I'm going to let go. And I'm going to let go of shift. So now I'm going to click and I'm going to drag my piece to the bottom of my paper. And you'll see I've got smart guides are on. It's under view, and I've got these snap, and it's going to snap to smart guides. So this has centered it, and I've got it on the bottom. And you'll see that it doesn't quite fill the whole paper. You are not going to scale it up. You just are not going to do that. Not going to happen. So first off, I want to commit this change of moving it 90 degrees. So I'm going to hit the return key, and then you see it kind of commits that change. So now I'm back into my normal kind of things that I had when I'm in move. So it only fills this much of the paper up, but it's a background. It's not totally regular. There's some stuff going on. So since I'm not going to scale it up, because then that's not going to look good, what I'm instead going to do is I'm going to make another copy of this paper, and I'm going to basically put it so that this other paper fills this top side. So what I want to do is I want to duplicate this layer here so that I can move it up. So now that I'm on that layer that I want, if I click on those 4 little lines here, I'm going to bring up my layer menu items. It's the same items I get if I clicked on layer up here. I prefer to use the one down here that's actually in the panel. You use whatever's best for you. So I want to duplicate the layer that I have. Now, whenever you duplicate the layer, it's going to ask you, what do you want to call it? Do you want to keep it in that same document that you're in? So right now, I'm going to call it paper background 2. Click OK. So now I've got this second paper, and I can pull it up and I can match it up to the top. Now, I'm not sure how well this does or doesn't match because the transform controls have got that blue line. So I'm going to uncheck my transform controls. And it doesn't match quite right because it's not a regular repeating background. You know, there's a little bit of difference in color and tone, which makes it more believable for being paper texture. But it also means it doesn't match up quite right. But I have a funny feeling that if I got this top and matched it up to the top here, that would look a lot better. So what I want to do now is I actually want to flip my paper. So I am going to go to edit into these transform controls. And down the bottom here, you have flip horizontal and flip vertical. Flip horizontal, that means that it's going to take the paper and it's going to flip it this way. Flip vertical, it's going to flip it up and down. So just think about your axes. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to try flipping it vertically. And that's a lot better. Now I still have this kind of weird mirror line here. So I'm just going to nudge my paper a little bit so it doesn't line up perfectly. And that kind of helps get rid of that weird kind of thing where it looked like it was like a mirror image. So now, because you want a little bit of irregularity, that kind of helps us believe that this is actual physical paper. So now it doesn't look, it's not stretched, so it doesn't look bad. It still looks really good if you zoom into 100%. So again, I'm using my view or my zoom in tool. So it still looks good at 100%. You don't have any weird, like I can't see the exact spot where I've mirrored it, so I don't have any weird like kind of like almost too perfectness, because you know it's a piece of paper, it's supposed to have imperfections. So now again, if I go to my view and I fit on screen, that looks good. But now I've got 2 layers for basically my paper background, and I don't really want that. So I'm going to merge these 2 layers together. So I'm going to take the first one, this top one, I'm going to hold down Shift and select the one underneath it. Now again, I can either do this through my little pop-up menu here, or I can do it from the layer menu here. And I'm going to merge these 2 layers. I don't want to merge everything visible because I want my like background to stay separate. I just want to merge these 2 together. So that's also Command E. And now it's merged in. And you'll notice that it took the name of the one that was on top. I'm just going to double click and just delete that 2 out and just hit return so that it keeps it. So now I've got my paper background and I've got my veggies.